but we're going to be talking about Middle Spoon today, which is your third book, your second novel. You have a book of short stories. So for everybody who is joining, I'll just say Alejandro Varela's debut novel, The Town of Babylon, was published in 2022 and was a finalist for the National Book Award. His second book, a collection of short stories titled The People Who Report More Stress, came out in 2023. But today, we're going to be focusing on your third novel, or your third book, Middle Spoon, which was released in September and details a gay man in Brooklyn's anxiety after his breakup with his boyfriend, while his husband and children and everyone else watch from the sidelines as he begins to unravel. Is that an okay way of describing it in a nutshell?
Perfect.
Well, thanks for joining me, Alejandro.
Happy to be here. Very happy.
So for those who haven't read the entire novel yet, it's an epistolary framework, meaning like it's written in letters. Really, they're emails, right? We never really learn who the narrator, what his name is, correct?
Right.
Yeah. But he's detailing these stories in these emails. Many of them are to his ex-boyfriend, Ben. Some are to his mother, his therapist. Yes, he has more than one therapist, his child, and I think maybe even some other people. I'm not sure, but he does a lot of emails, right? Why did you decide to use that format? Because it's a tricky one.
Yeah. So I think I think in my own life, the many times I've wanted to communicate with someone about something very personal, emotional, something I'm angry about, something I want to complain about, and it's often an email that I don't send. And so if I go to my draft emails, I have all sorts of letters to the New York Times editorial board, to politicians, to friends, to partners, just things that I write and then I say, okay, do not send, think about this. And so I thought this would make perfect sense, the modern day journal, that he would want to communicate more, because with your partner, chances are your regular communication are text messages or very quick messages that don't require much context because of your sort of day-to-day life together. And so they can't do that anymore because they're broken up and he is heartbroken and they have boundaries. So the next step up would be an email where he could really get a lot of feelings about what happened, what went wrong, how he interpreted it all, maybe, plea to get back together or not. And so the format itself made sense in the moment. And then as I was writing the book, I thought at some point I'll leave the emails and we'll have some real life context. But then I was really enjoying it all. And the thing about heartbreak, if you've ever experienced it before, is that it's a unique type of grief. And it's also super selfish and annoying. And your friends at first just want to take care of you and make sure everything's all right. And then at some point, they're really looking at you like, get over it. Like, just get over it. And I thought a person who is having all of these feelings and is sort of, kind of as self-aware as this narrator tries to be, isn't going to send those emails. He knows enough not to send them. But he also has a lot he wants to process. And we find out over time what that has to do with his mental health and his upbringing. And the unsent email is great because can be annoying, it can be embarrassing. But if you take a step back, you realize it's not because he's not sending it to anyone. He's really just sharing the contents of his brain. So the book ended up being a transcription of the mind in a way, but a great way to give a history of the relationship and to give a sense of who this person is and how he views the world. And so I couldn't think of any other way. You would only be that honest and that personal with your diary and your therapists. And so I had it covered in the book.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it echoes Lena Dunham's new show, Too Much. I don't know if you saw that with Megan Stolter. She's basically doing it with videos that she's not sending. And then, of course, what happens is those things end up leaking and everybody sees her cringe messages that she's been saying to her ex. I mean, that's something that's interesting, though, because there's something about the narrator that is too much, that is extreme, that he is over the top in his breakup grief. And as you're saying, he can be vulnerable like that because he's not planning on sending them. But we, as the reader, are getting all of that unfiltered. I'm curious, like, were you worried that people would end up hating this person because he is so much?
I worried, no. Uh, in my first two books and maybe in life, I am a middle child after all. I do care about being likable, and I do want to be a good communicator. That's my background in public health, and maybe just being the child of immigrants. You're always trying to interpret things for people, and I am always very concerned with my writing being accessible.
Right.
Um, and I think accessibility isn't just the sort of register of the language or the concepts; it's also the likability of something.
Mhm.
And um, but I really, like I said, I wanted to capture this very unique type of grief, and there is no way around it. It is not likable. And
Mhm.
so my job, I felt like while I was writing, it was to be equal parts kind of unlikable, but also endearing, hopefully, and entertaining. And so trying to strike that balance where you're like, yeah, this is annoying, but he makes me laugh, or this is annoying, but that scene was sexy, or this is annoying, but actually I've been through it and I can relate.
Right.
Um, that was the sort of alchemy of this, is trying to find the right formula so that all of those things could work. And really letting go. That was very personal for me, was letting go and being like, okay, he's not going to be likable. And that's okay.
Right.
It's okay if someone is annoyed.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's okay if someone's annoyed. I just hope they keep reading it, right?
Right.
And we were all forced to read Catcher in the Rye in school. Holden Caulfield was annoying. Um, there are lots of narrators that are annoying or problematic, but my hope is that the rest of it makes up for it.
Right. Well, I mainly engaged with it as a narrative. I listened to it. Eddie Lopez is your narrator, and he does an excellent job. So I'm going to play a clip, and this is actually an email that the narrator is writing to his mom. So the chapter says, "Dear Mom," and so here we go. It's a short clip.
Hypothesis. Removing hierarchy, in this case gender, from a relationship, which isn't to say there aren't gender differences between two guys or gals, increases its equity quotient. A romantic partnership, not unlike a friendship or a society, cannot thrive in a state of disparity, and this is precisely why straight relationships are, as you suggested, at a disadvantage. One half of a hetero pairing will always be on a rung higher than his other half, whether they want to be or not. The other half is gaslit from the beginning. Girls are told they're princesses, queens, goddesses, diamonds, pearls, precious in every way, but they're subjugated in as many ways too. At least, insert every other oppressed group here, are treated like shit and told they're shit, but women get offered a seat on the subway and then raped on the walk home. This cruelty finds its way into everything. You and Dad couldn't achieve the sort of parity you witnessed in my marriage because you were locked in a power struggle influenced by this societal illness. The stress of being undesirable immigrants didn't help. If you'd been rich, white, and born here, your marriage might have been nearer to what you wanted it to be. You too might have dabbled in polyamory if you'd been able to pay the electricity bill. Who knows? None of this is to say my marriage is perfect or that our race and class differences are easily surmounted. But when two people are on the same plane, honesty isn't as painful or scary.
So I'll stop there. How was that? Listening to that.
I hadn't heard Eddie read it yet. I think he's wonderful, and I'd heard him read other work, and so that was my first time. But I get a lot of messages telling me that they really enjoyed the reading of it. That section I hadn't read in a long time. Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting. I go through maybe what the readers go through too, just because it's been so long. Where at first I was thinking, this is fiction. Why is he telling us so? Why is he getting so socio-political on us right now? Can he just give us a story, for the love of God? And then by the end, I'm like, oh, I like these little philosophical bits. I think it's nice to pepper writing with it. I love philosophical writing in fiction. Always have. And so I realize that that's what I'm trying to do too.
Well, also, I think what's so nice about it is when you have an elegant writer like yourself, be able to articulate something that we wish we could say to our parents, but we're never going to be able to actually say.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so, I mean, let's unpack that a little bit of the idea of the paradigm that one, this character is navigating his privilege, right? He's like, I'm able to have this relationship because I'm not struggling to pay the electric bill. Like, I'm not dealing with the things that mom and dad dealt with, is one thing.
Right.
I mean, that's a really profound thing to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as it concerns polyamory, as it concerns, I don't know, organic chicken. I mean, all of the things that feel like privileges in this life that shouldn't be privileges. They're just part of the human experience, right? They're part of just trying to live a healthy existence and a complete existence. They all get much harder when in this sort of hierarchy of needs. If you can't meet the basic needs, how are you going to meet the superfluous ones or the new one? And so, yeah, so that conversation we had with his parents, but it's kind of funny because he is in a mixed race gay relationship and he's talking to his heterosexual mom. And so you start to see who's Latina, right? And so you start to see where the hierarchies kind of intersect and what wins out. And ultimately, if you're high on the class hierarchy, you can get away with a lot, right? You can really excel in this world, which is how we end up having so many gay Republicans. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I want to, I mean, obviously the core of this book is exploring polyamorous relationship, and there aren't a lot of positive representations of poly relationships in novels. Often it's a love triangle, it's a cautionary tale. There's a lot of Sturm und Drang kind of thing. One person has told me that Sally Rooney's Intermezzo is a recent one, but I haven't actually read that book yet. But why did you think it was important to explore this in particular flavor of queer relationship in a novel?
Yeah, so I'll be honest that I didn't start out to write a poly novel. I started out to write a grief novel. And like my narrator, I realized the context of it, I couldn't ignore. It was huge. And so halfway through the book, I was like, oh, this is going to be a poly novel. I mean, it's going to be received that way. I was trying to write honestly and authentically about the sort of queer life, not just that I'm a part of, but that exists in my world. But I write every one of my books really is grappling with conformity and this idea that like there's only one way to live and that we're all working really hard to get to this one sort of the highest rung on the American dream ladder, which I'm calling bull on. And I try to with all of my books. There is no achieving that because to get to that place, you're going to be alone. And then what's the point of getting there? And so I wanted to write about poly because I love this idea that at any point in our lives, we can sort of be like, wait a second, is it possible that this thing that I've based my entire existence on is wrong? George Michael, who I adored and whose music I've always enjoyed, he features in this book somewhat prominently, at least in one of the chapters. And after I'd written the book, before it went to publication, I watched an interview with him on Instagram in which the reporter said something along the lines of like, why are the gays so artistic? Like, why are we in these creative fields? And I've never really fully understood that. My instinct is to always be like, don't stereotype, mom or whoever thinks that. But there is something to it. And he hit it on the head. He said, if all your life you're told boy meets girl makes baby, and it's not just a part of living in this world. It is the building block to this life. And everything else is wrong or unnecessary or dangerous, unhealthy. If at some point you're lucky enough to be aware or to realize that there's nothing wrong with you for being queer, that there is, in fact, it's beautiful. Like the diversity of the human experience is so amazing. If you're lucky to achieve that place in life, then suddenly you question everything else because the quintessential human precept was wrong. And so then suddenly you start to question like the police and Israel and gender and all of it, all of the power structures, you suddenly start to wonder. And that is the basis of good art. If you're constantly asking questions about why is this, and not just literal questions, just changing who you are, questioning your appearance, questioning how you walk in this world and what you do and what you say and how you feel. And so that queerness, I think, lends itself to artistic professions and good art, like I said. So polyamory to me was a way to question not only the norms of romantic institution in our society, but also the conservatism within gayness and frankly within queerness. Because anyway, I think.
Well, and you mentioned that in another interview. You mentioned the idea of somebody being a PEP instead of it being progressive except Palestine, it was progressive except polyamory. And I feel like that's what you're touching on, right? Like there's some people who are like, okay, I'm okay with all of this except that.
Right. And I would add progressive except for public schools as well. There are 3 PEPs in this world. And I consider myself a pretty left of center human in terms of my perspectives and my political beliefs and my humanity. And I have encountered from some of my most radically progressive friends eyebrows about polyamory, eyebrows about Palestine, and eyebrows about public schools. And I think the polyamory part is interesting because it runs deep, that love and intimate romantic relationships are one-to-one. I'm laughing a little. That George Michael's famous song, like, sex is best when it's one-on-one. Anyway, that's his like ode to I guess monogamy, but that was written during a different time. And I think people put themselves in the position of the being left behind. Like if you, Jerry, and I are together for 25 years and we're happily married and all of our friends and family love and adore us and they finally welcomed you in. And not just that, they feel good about having this like really normie gay couple in their lives who have children and who pay their bills and they have a home and, they're not wearing like leather harnesses to like the birthday party. So that, I think you sort of throw that on its head when you introduce polyamory.
Right.
Suddenly, like you're drawing attention to yourself in a way that like feels dangerous. Like you're going to be judged, or you feel like, oh my God, what if the person I love loves someone else and didn't adore me only? If I wasn't the center of their world, and so there's a lot of transposing of emotions. I think. Like some of the people in my life who have been opposed to polyamory, they just can't help but imagine themselves in the role of the person who gets left. Obviously, that person didn't love me enough because they needed something else. Right. Never always thinking of love, I think, as something scarce that can't grow.
Right.
And I think I write in the book because the narrator has 2 children. And, it's like, I've heard this before from people when they have one child, they're like, am I going to love my first child less when the second one shows up? And that's not the case. It does grow. Is it as cheesy and as honest as that? It grows, and no one is without love and affection, or they don't have to be with the right resources. And I think that is possible with romantic relationships. And a lot of the jealousy and a lot of the programming, maybe not all, because I don't understand all of the science of the human brain or genetics, I think just comes from this like modeling that if you are with someone, you must be 100% devoted to them. You cannot have other love and other romantic interests, and sometimes not even other friends. It's like you just see that, or you're told a healthy relationship is like complete devotion, and I question that with this story. Yeah,
you I actually love what you just said, and I want to continue on that thread, but I also want to ask how this dovetails with your work in public health, because you are really stealth in the sense that you've snuck or tucked in public health into all of your writing, and you see this as part of your practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying, I think, is connected to that about questioning norms, but also looking at systems and questioning the systems. Or I don't know. Tell us about the public health side of things.
Yeah. To me, the most fascinating thing that I learned in public health that I found it difficult to find a public health track and career where I could devote my life to stress research and hierarchy research, but it exists. And it has been well established that the more hierarchical a society or a community is, which is to say, you know, like if there are people with so much power up here and then a lot less power down here, and it's all very stratified, we find that the people near the top are much healthier than the people at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And not just that, the more stratified a society is, the worse off everyone is at every rung compared to a population in which that's flatter, you know? And so some of that has to do with like having a quote unquote middle class and having, you know, universal health care, things that are egalitarian that make us all better off. But so a lot of the findings around this are that not having community and feeling like an outsider because of these hierarchies, and hierarchies are everything. It's not just class and money, it's race, it's gender, it's ability. There's always people up here, and then there's always people down here in all of these categories. And that makes it really hard for us to connect. And humans are social above all things. That's why we make eye contact. We scan our perimeters to feel safe. And if we see eyes and we see a smile, we can relax a little. If you feel like the person you just looked at is judging you, doesn't like you, clutches their purse, feels threatened by any one of those things, you have this little tick in cortisol in your body. And that's really helpful when you're out running or trying to outrun like a lion in the savannah. Okay. Because you don't need to do all of the things that would normally happen. You just need blood to go to your lungs and your legs to run. And if your energy goes to those two places, if it's diverted, that's fine for short periods of time. The birth of your child, a big speech, you know, the Oscars, you name it. Those are the things that like should increase your cortisol levels, your stress levels for short periods of time. But if they become a part of your daily life because you're afraid of the police, because you're afraid of this, because you don't know how you're going to pay your rent, then guess what? All of the processes in your body that shut down while you were running away from the lion in the savannah, you're not ovulating, you're not regrowing skin, you're not regrowing hair, you're not repairing tissue. Those things can't shut off for long periods of time because that increases wear and tear and then you die. And so when I learned that and I realized, oh my God, every major cause of death has a stress component to it. So if we were to just pass a few policies that would reduce stress across the board, we'd still have diabetes, we'd still have cancer, we'd still have dementia, we'd still have all those things, but they would be manageable. They wouldn't be epidemics and the crises that we have in society. But it's much harder to tell people as a public health worker or as a public health program to be like, hey, don't be hierarchical. That's impossible. It's much easier to say, put on a condom. It's much easier to say, do exercise, floss, wear a seatbelt. Those things are actionable steps that make people feel like they're taking their health into their hands, and then everyone can be like, public health, it works. It's much harder to pass a living wage bill. It's much harder to, you know, pass reparations or land back, massive things that would change the stress levels in our country. And so I wanted to communicate that. So my stories are always about how does self-aggrandizement or success in our society, like because we subscribe to capitalism, how does that destroy the community? And in the process of destroying the community, how does it make us unhealthy? And so polyamory, being queer, being in a mixed race relationship, even just climbing the social ladder, you're always going to leave people behind. Either because they don't accept you because, you know, your kid is non-binary and you're trying to raise them non-binary, or they don't accept you because now you have a second partner and they don't know what to do with you at Thanksgiving and they don't know what they're going to tell the neighbor. Or, you know, you name it. But those things, guess what they do? You have to then choose. Do I choose my happiness? Or do I sacrifice it for the community? And when you have to choose happiness versus community, something is wrong. And the truth is, like, none of those things are bad for anyone. It's just this fear, this constant fear that, like, in the case of this character, what he fears is that if he tells his family, they're going to be stressed out. And I think he's right, because this family has already gotten through, like, being immigrants, and then they had a gay son, and they've gotten through all of those things. Now they're going to have gay son. Like, how many more spotlights are they going to have on their lives? And all they want to do is just live quietly and get through it.
Yeah, it's and it's great that you're mentioning the hierarchy thing, because in relationship to polyamory, that's obviously an important thing. And the character at the center of this is struggling with the fact that his husband is his primary partner, right? And that is a hierarchy, right? He's saying, I privilege my husband and my nuclear family basically over my boyfriend, and then that becomes the conflict that he's dealing with.
Right.
And he has to resolve.
And I would say it's a perfect example of how the outside world influences the inside world. Like that vignette that you played about a heterosexual couple, you know, it's very rare that you're going to cut off what's the entire world tells you about men and women when you get home. A heterosexual couple or a straight couple, they're still going to bring a lot of that damage with them at home, and they have to work through it. And and so similarly, like if society says no, you can't split your estate between two partners, or you can't get health insurance for both partners, or you only get one invitation to this party or this wedding, or so and so, you keep going, then suddenly society's lack of imagination about what happiness can look like causes stress at home.
It's also embedded in our language in gay coupling, let's say, because you also get into the whole top and bottom thing. You also, and in Spanish, it's even more complicated because when I was learning that in and like when I was in Spain and learning that, it's pasivo, like you're actually passive, is the word for a bottom, right? And so there's this embedded part of that. And so you get into that, which I think is great, because I often ask people about roles and they often interpret it meaning sexual roles. And I don't just mean that. I mean, like, how do you figure out your domestic roles? How do you figure out all these other things? Because I think in same gender or same sex relationships, that can get quite complicated with the idea of a hierarchy, and people on the outside often assume it's also based on who's the top and who's the bottom, right?
Right. Which is too bad, because maybe the one advantage that same sex or same gender couples have is that they collapse those two hierarchies at home, right? It's not about gender and sex so much. It can be, because we're still spectrum too within our kind of genders and sexes. But then it gets undone with like, oh, right, there are these expectations that one person has to be this and one person has to be that. And, even taking a step back amongst at least gay people in my life, I think it's like, oh, you're in an open relationship, right? Like for them, an open relationship, I'm like, just do that. That's easier. Like, why complicate it by falling in love and trying to sustain multiple romantic, long-term relationships? And I mean, I got the sense, even when I was talking about this with lots of people as I was writing it, that people would be like, why can't you, like, just cheat? Like, just, if you really, even if you're not open, isn't it just so much easier to just have sex with someone and keep going? Like, why introduce it? It just stresses people out because it is so outside of their norm to be like, I am going to try and make this all work so that we are all empowered. We are all even. It's not like this person isn't a side piece. This other person isn't, like, it's not daddy and granddaddy. It's like 3 adults or more. And we're all going to navigate these relationships. And, that's what was in a way interesting about this book, is the narrator wasn't like, I'm polyamorous and I want to make this work. It was like, he fell in love with someone and was still in love with someone else. And he said, I want both of these beautiful relationships to continue. Oh, is this polyamory? Well, in that case, I'm pro polyamory, right? I think it started out of necessity, that like he realized, oh, this is what's happening.
Right. For all those who have joined, if you have any questions for Alejandro, I'm going to play another clip. This comes later. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. This is the narrator has written this email to Ben, his ex-boyfriend. And it's a short clip, but I don't know, I really love the writing here, so I just want to share it.
The feelings are no longer mutual and possibly never were. This is a cage. An invisible cage that dangles over something unknown and murky. A few days ago, I was a respected public health researcher. Now, I'm a trapped animal and a feeble poet. Can I call you, please? We don't have to get back together, just to talk, to better understand what's happened. I want to be a decent human, a good guy. Give you space, respect your wishes, allow you to get over me. I don't want to be an asshole or a hashtag, but this situation is indecent. What even constitutes acceptable romantic human interactions in this era, particularly between two people born in different generations and advertising target groups? You once told me that no guy had ever treated you as well as I had. What, pray tell, does that title afford me? For the last 2 decades, I've been in a proverbial well. Married, that is. My human relations arsenal consists of exactly one rudimentary tool: reading the room. But this tool is obsolete in a room full of smoke. To further complicate matters, your youth inspires you to be more outspoken in defense of your autonomy. This is an altogether great development for society and for future generations, but as it concerns our May-December romance, it's only 9 years for Pete's sake, I'm up a creek. It's also worth mentioning that I've noticed a penchant among younger people for using the language of oppression and liberation in rather self-aggrandizing ways that allow for the avoidance of growth and healing. Eavesdropping on my students is as life-affirming as it is an exercise in eye-rolling. Please, Ben, don't shun me for being human. Not all conflict is abuse. If we ever talk again, I'm going to lend you Sarah Schulman's book. Love, me.
So I've listened to that last bit so many times, and I've written it down because I just really think the way you've encapsulated that one part also about the language of oppression being used. I don't know. It makes people feel very seen, or maybe I like it. So thanks.
No, I mean, I thank you. I share that with the narrator, at least that particular perspective. I do think we are living in a time where the language of oppression and social justice and social movements has become more popular. It used to be very esoteric. It used to be like social workspaces and social movement spaces and therapy. But now it does feel like everyone can refer to the psychology of what's going on and the deeper issues, can name them. But I don't know that we've all done the actual work to understand those things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're not turning the lens on ourselves. And so it's just sort of finding that middle ground. I would argue that this narrator, it sounds like in that moment, what he's doing is critiquing youth. So people who are younger than him. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that like the healthy point is probably somewhere in the middle. Like he could probably stand to fight for himself a bit more in life, or he might have been healthier if he'd had some of those tools that the youth have now. But I think his experience affords him the right to say, but maybe you guys aren't using the tools correctly all the time.
Mm-hmm. No, I actually love that too, because I remember having older gay men get really angry about younger gay men, especially when PrEP came around, saying like, how dare you, go be slutty and all this stuff. And of course, this was the year that we had our big viral article about the peak gay sluttiness. And yet, then if you step back for a second, you think, wait, this is actually what we fought for, was this level of freedom, of autonomy, of the ability to do these things that a whole generation or several generations didn't have, right? Yeah. And we recently published a piece about that of a survivor of AIDS saying like he was telling the guy, you need to be on PrEP. And the guy's like, I don't really think I need to. I mean, I know this is probably hard to hear from a public health standpoint, because he's like, because everybody else is, and if I get infected, there's drugs for this, right? And it's just treatable. And yet he was like, wait, I can't make people think the way I do. This is a new generation, and I need to also realize that I'm thinking in fear, and they're not living in the same fear that I'm living in, and don't have the same steps.
Oof, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm 46, and my sort of socialization, my formative years, my sexualization all happened during and in the penumbra of AIDS in the first big wave in the United States. And so sex to me is still, even today, I haven't fully disentangled it from fear and danger. And so, I mean, that's for future therapists to comment on. But so I've always been fascinated, and my work in public health and in HIV/AIDS, it's always been interesting to have this split brain on it, because on the one hand, progress, science, humanity, respect, and all the advancements we've made. And on the other hand, I'm like, I'm afraid the worst thing that could ever happen to me is if I were HIV positive, right? It's almost like the worst thing that could ever happen to me, I'm saying, is to have to take a couple extra pills like a lot of people that I love and respect who are super happy and healthy, you know? And so, like, I don't want to have to do that. I don't think anyone is suggesting that we should just be like, yay, let's all have HIV. But at the same time, it isn't what it was. And I think he is showing his age, the narrator in this book, and his experience. And I think that's part of the joys of Ben, is that it's a younger person with a completely different perspective. And he's learning, right? Like, I had this conversation with my friend TJ I used to years ago. I'd be like, I thought we were avoiding HIV and AIDS so that we didn't have to take pills every single day for the rest of our lives. And now in order to avoid HIV and AIDS, we have to take pills every day for the rest of our lives. But as my friend TJ always points out, yes, but PrEP you can stop whenever you want.
Right.
And so I'm super, I've always been careful with my curmudgeonly narrators because they are in some ways much more progressive and much more conservative than I am, because my interest is in writing the arc. And my interest is in showing fallible people so that a reader who is also thinking about these things, is also embarrassed about some thoughts that they have or don't have, can grow with a narrator, or at least see themselves reflected and then not feel so, maybe be more willing to have these conversations and admit to themselves what they really feel too. And in order to do that, I have to, deviate a little bit away from who I am and imagine, like, what if I felt this? And what if I didn't feel this? And so, watching him have some epiphanies around PrEP and sex and liberation is fascinating.
So one of the questions I like to ask everybody in our questionnaires or in these interviews is, we use this word love, and it's kind of a shabby word that means a lot of things. But how, in this context, how do you define love? Like, let's say in the concept of middle spoon, or like, what is love? And is it that exciting feeling that you find when you're falling in love, or is it this thing of supporting each other, the long term, or I've already put restraints on it, so ignore everything I just said and just how do you define love?
It's an interesting question. I think it's twofold in the book, because there's the sort of the eros, and then there's the filial, and I think I want to acknowledge that, like, a huge part of the book is his relationship with his parents and his children. And for most of the time that I was writing the book, the working title was A Children's Guide to Heartbreak. And because I keep thinking about how I'm a parent, and I'm constantly worried about my kids' health and safety. And so I think about all the ways in which I try to prevent things and teach them. But you can't prepare anyone for heartbreak. It's just not, you just have to live it. But also, we don't really talk about it too much. I never talked to my parents about heartbreak. That was never a thing that my mom said, this may happen someday, and it's going to hurt. And I don't know why. So anyway, so for me, love in this book is a little bit also transparency, like being able to be honest about your feelings and your fears with people, and finding someone who can accept that and modeling it. So he doesn't have that with his parents, so he tries to model it for his children, even though it's hard. It's like pushing through a difficult conversation, so that his hope is that this inability for me to be transparent with my mom, I hope my kids never have that with me. And so the only way to do that is to tell his kids about polyamory. And that's very difficult for him. So there's that. In terms of a more romantic sexual love, to me, an ideal love is one where that's equitable. And what I mean by that is, like, accepting that what you do for me, I may not be able to do for you. And because we have very different needs and also thresholds for pain and discomfort and happiness. Some people read the husband character in this book, or any sort of partner in a polyamorous situation, they're read as doormats. Some people are like, oh, there's just no way. Like, people would never abide by such a thing. I mean, they must not have a backbone. They must hate themselves. They must this, that, or the other thing. But I write that husband character who appears in most of my work. He is an aspirational figure for me. I'm not that person. I have jealousy. I have insecurities. But I believe that a lot of those come from societal stuff and conditions in which I was raised. And so I'm fascinated by the people who, who aren't threatened. And so for me, love in that way is kind of like making as much room for your partner's happiness, whatever that may be. And working towards it, even when it's difficult. To be like, I'm going to push a little further. I'm not going to torture myself, but I'm going to push. I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm going to push my boundaries a little bit to meet them where they're at. And the longer you go in a relationship, I think the more willing you should be to push those boundaries, right? Like I'm there's a bit of loyalty that comes with love. And I think I would not have been happy writing a book where a couple that's been together for 20 plus years, one of them's like, I fell in love with someone else. Our relationship is over. I'm most interested in being like, wait, can we continue to love and support each other and then have this other experience come into the room too? Not the literal room, but the sort of proverbial room. And that fascinates me. I would love to write a book in which the husband appears and says, I've met someone. How is the narrator going to take it? And that might be a book I write one day. How will the narrator take it? Because the husband, in a way, is not generous. He's neither a doormat nor is he necessarily generous. It's who he is. For me, generosity suggests that you are going without in a way, like you are depriving yourself of something, whether emotional or physical, something to give to someone else because you love this person so much, you're going to give. But for the husband, he's never been threatened. It doesn't sound to me like for a moment he is, or I didn't mean to write him that way, where he is, this is so painful, but I love him so much, I'm going to do this.
No, he's not making a sacrifice. He actually is just supporting.
He's like, this is practical. This makes sense. He still shows up. He still makes dinner. He's still a good dad. We still have sex. And he's happier for having had this other experience. That doesn't mean it won't get complicated and that he won't have to sacrifice. But the nature of being comfortable with your partner having romantic or sexual happiness with someone else isn't always a stretch for people. And that's so hard for people in general to believe. And I think that goes back to love and affection, and all those things are in short supply. And if I found someone who gives it to me, I have to hold on to it at all costs. And if he gives it to someone else or she gives it to someone else, that must mean I'm not good enough anymore.
It goes back to that analogy when people would say love is like a piece of pie and there's only so many slices and you can't, you run out, the scarcity.
Right.
So I feel like the last question I wanted to ask was about if you had any advice for people but it sounds like in a way you just gave us some really great advice.
I was recently invited to a polyamory book club. And I never go in person to book clubs. I have done twice with this book because I've been invited to so many small little book clubs. I will hop online to join a final meeting of a book club. And I went, and it was the first time I had been around people who every one of them had a different situation. Because polyamory is a little like socialism. Like it means different things to different people. There are some basic tenets, but usually it's like about a less selfish love, and or an unselfish love. And so I was surrounded by people who all live the life in a healthy way that I'm writing about in a dramatic way. And I was kind of fascinated by that. And I kept thinking, I think everything deserves a support group. Everything gets easier when you have people who are going through exactly or something like what you're going through. So if I were, dabbling in polyamory or trying to find my way, my first experience, I would track down people who are in polyamorous situations. And I would say, can I know you better? Like, I want to know what you're going through. And then we go back to logistics. Instead of a double date, could we ever have a triple, like where we all get to just sort of meet and connect. And so I think that's really important. Also, therapy is so important. It is can be such a beautiful thing. And while I do believe therapy is essential in our society, I think we'd need it less if we were more community oriented, because a lot of, like, I think of the people in my life who are old school and are just so about community, mostly the women in my life of older generations. They talk to each other all the time. They have regular check-ins, way more than my generation does. And so my mom gets her therapy from talking to so many people every day. That doesn't mean she still doesn't need it, but she does a lot of problem solving and in a way feels safe and protected by having a large network of people that she can talk to. And so for those of us who don't, for those of us who are in the rat race and it's about survival, it's, we make up for it in other ways, and that's where therapy comes.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a form of group therapy. Well, I just want to thank you. Oh, I might have lost you for a second. We might have lost Alejandro. Let's see if he comes back. Well, in case we don't have Alejandro back, I think his internet connection was getting weak. I just wanted to. Oh, you do see me. Okay, good. I just wanted to thank you again for joining us, and for anyone who's listening on a platform and is already not a subscriber to the Queer Love Project, I just want to remind you that you can go to queerloveproject.substack.com and subscribe for free. And Alejandro, I don't have you back on screen, but there you are. Good. I get to see you again.
Okay, good. Okay.
I just wanted to say thanks so much for joining us today. I think you definitely expanded my understanding of the other characters. I didn't play a clip of the letter that the narrator writes to his son Nico, or his child Nico, but I thought that was an amazing section as well, and I hope people who haven't read it or listened to it all find this. Any last words you want to have for readers or listeners?
I guess I would just say that I've been very grateful for the conversations that have arisen from this book, not just around polyamory, but around grief and around mental illness, and specifically OCD. Mm-hmm. And I think, just trying to live your best life when it's complicated with so many other layers is fascinating, and I think it's nice to have support and community in those moments for all of those things. And I wrote this book a little bit like, wow, this pain sucks and it's real. And I think so many of us have felt it. And so I hope when people read it, there's kind of creates even just a sense of belonging in reading the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope more people discover it. It's been a few months. It's one of my favorite books of the year. So thanks so much for putting in the work.
Oh, and I would say that for the people who maybe don't buy books, it is just as wonderful when you recommend it at the library. So, or when you reserve it at the library. So please do that.
There you are. See, you're being generous. Well, thank you. I'll let you get back to your Sunday. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Gary. Take care. Pleasure.